The moment she said it, Carter Whitfield felt something inside him shift in a way he couldn't immediately explain. It wasn't anger at first. It was confusion. Then it slowly turned into something colder. Because Vivian Aldridge wasn't joking. She was looking straight at him, calm, composed, as if she had just stated something completely reasonable. And somehow, in her mind, it was... Carter leaned back slightly in his chair, watching her carefully across the polished marble table in their Scottsdale kitchen. The late afternoon sun filtered through the glass walls, casting long, clean lines across the room. Everything about their life together looked perfect, everything except this moment. I just want to make sure we're aligned before the wedding, Vivian added, her tone measured, almost strategic. Aligned. The word lingered longer than it should have. Carter exhaled slowly, trying to process what he had just heard without reacting too quickly. You're saying, after we get married, I'll be financially supporting your ex? Vivian nodded once, as if confirming a logistical detail. Yes. No hesitation. No discomfort. Just certainty. Carter felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice controlled. Why? Vivian's expression didn't crack. Because he needs stability right now. That answer didn't sit right. Not even close. Carter studied her face, searching for any sign that she understood how unusual this sounded. There was none. Vivian, he said carefully, you're asking me to take responsibility for someone you used to be in a relationship with. It's not like that, she replied quickly. It is exactly like that, Carter said, still calm but firmer now. She crossed her arms slightly, not defensive but grounded in her position. You're looking at this emotionally, she said. I'm looking at it practically. That was the first real shift. Not the request itself, but the framing. Because to her, this wasn't emotional. This was strategy. Carter leaned forward, elbows resting lightly on the table. Explain the practicality. Vivian took a small breath, organizing her thoughts like she always did before making a case. He built part of his career around me, she said. He made sacrifices when we were together. And now? Carter asked. Now he's struggling, she said. And I'm not the kind of person who just walks away from that. Carter felt something else now. Not anger. Something closer to unease. Because what she was describing didn't sound like lingering affection. It sounded like obligation. And obligation had a way of reshaping relationships in ways people didn't always admit. And where do I fit into that? Carter asked quietly. Vivian didn't hesitate. You're my future, she said. But that doesn't erase my past. There it was. Clean. Logical. Uncompromising. Carter leaned back again, letting the silence stretch between them. This wasn't about money. Not really. He had built his own investment firm from the ground up. He understood risk, commitment, and long-term strategy better than most. But this didn't feel like an investment. It felt like something else entirely. Something undefined. And undefined things rarely stayed contained. Before we go further, Carter said, turning slightly toward the unseen audience in his mind, I want you to think about this with me. If someone you were about to marry asked you to financially support their ex, would you see that as compassion or a boundary being crossed? He looked back at Vivian. Because I'm trying to figure out which one this is. Vivian didn't answer immediately. For the first time, there was a flicker of something behind her composure. Not doubt, but awareness. This isn't permanent, she said finally. That matters, Carter replied. But it doesn't change the principle. She leaned forward now, mirroring his earlier posture. What principle? That once we're married, Carter said, our resources, our decisions, our priorities, they're supposed to be aligned with each other. They are, she insisted. No, he said calmly. They're divided. The word landed harder than he intended. Vivian's expression tightened just slightly. You're making this bigger than it is. And you're making it smaller than it is, Carter replied. That was the moment the tension truly escalated. Not because voices were raised, but because neither of them stepped back. Vivian stood up from the table, walking a few steps toward the window. Her reflection looked almost identical to her real self. Controlled, measured, unmoved. You're focusing on the wrong thing, she said without turning around. I'm focusing on what this means for us, Carter replied. It means I'm someone who honors my commitments, she said. Carter stood up slowly. And what about your commitment to me? She turned now. That's exactly why I'm telling you this before we get married. It was a strong argument. Transparent. Direct. But something about it still didn't sit right. Because transparency didn't automatically make something reasonable. It just made it visible. Carter walked toward her, stopping a few feet away. Have you already been helping him? He asked. Vivian held his gaze. Yes. That answer hit differently. Not because of the action itself, but because of the timing. How long? A year. Carter nodded slowly, absorbing that. A year. That meant this wasn't a new situation. This was already part of her life. And now she was asking him to step into it. Not as an outsider, but as a participant. Does he know about me? Carter asked. Vivian hesitated for the first time. Yes, she said. Does he know you're planning to continue supporting him after we're married? Another pause. Yes. That changed something. Not just for Carter, but for the entire dynamic. Because now there were 3 people connected to a decision that was supposed to belong to 2. Does he expect it? Carter asked. Vivian didn't answer immediately. That silence was louder than anything she could have said. Carter stepped back slightly, giving himself space to think. This wasn't just about generosity. It wasn't just about loyalty. It was about expectations. And expectations had a way of becoming permanent, even when people claimed they were temporary. You've already created a system, Carter said quietly. Vivian frowned slightly. It's not a system. It is, he replied, and you're asking me to fund it. Her expression hardened just a little. That's not fair. What's not fair, Carter said, still calm, is pretending this doesn't affect the foundation of what we're building. The room felt different now. Heavier. More defined. Vivian crossed her arms again, this time with a hint of tension. So what are you saying? Carter didn't answer right away, because he knew this was the turning point. Not just in the conversation, but in everything that would come after. He looked at her, really looked at her, at the woman he had planned to marry, at the future he had already started building in his mind. And then he spoke. I'm saying I can't agree to that. The words were calm, clear, final. Vivian didn't react immediately, but something in her posture shifted. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. So that's it? She asked. It's not that's it, Carter said. It's a boundary. She let out a quiet breath. And if I don't agree? Carter held her gaze. Then we have a bigger problem than this one decision. That was the midpoint. The moment everything changed. Because now it wasn't about the ex anymore. It was about values, alignment, and what each of them was willing to accept in the long term. Vivian turned away again, walking back toward the table. She rested her hands on the edge, staring down at the surface as if searching for something there. You're asking me to walk away from someone who depended on me, she said quietly. I'm asking you to decide who you're building a life with, Carter replied. She closed her eyes for a brief second. When she opened them, they were steady again. This isn't easy, she said. I know, Carter replied. But neither is what you're asking of me. Silence filled the room again. Longer this time, more deliberate. And then Vivian spoke. I need time to think. Carter nodded once. That's fair. He didn't push further. He didn't try to persuade her. Because at this point, persuasion wouldn't solve anything. Only clarity would. Days passed. Then a week. Communication between them became careful. Measured. Almost professional. Until finally, Vivian asked to meet. Not at the house, but at a quiet restaurant in downtown Scottsdale. Neutral ground. Carter arrived first. He sat at a corner table, watching the city move outside the window. When Vivian walked in, she looked the same. But something about her presence felt different. Less certain, more introspective. She sat across from him, folding her hands together. I've been thinking about everything, she said. Carter nodded, letting her continue. And I realized something I didn't want to admit before. He waited. I wasn't helping him because he needed it, she said. I was helping him because I didn't want to feel responsible for where he ended up. That was the first completely honest statement she had made about it. And it changed everything. Carter didn't interrupt. I thought it made me a good person, she continued. But I see now that it was also keeping me tied to something I should have already let go of. She looked at him directly. I didn't realize how much I was asking you to carry. Carter leaned back slightly, absorbing her words. This wasn't an apology in the traditional sense. It was something deeper. Awareness. And now, he asked. Vivian took a breath. I've ended it, she said. Completely. No hesitation this time. Just clarity. Carter watched her for a moment, not searching for flaws, but confirming what he felt. And you're sure? She nodded. Yes. He exhaled slowly. Not relief. Not entirely, but something close. Because decisions like that weren't just about intention. They were about follow-through. And follow-through took time to prove. Before we move forward, Carter said, pausing again to acknowledge the weight of the moment, I want to ask you something. He glanced outward, as if addressing more than just her. If someone changes their position after being challenged, do you see that as growth, or as something they might revert back to later? He looked back at Vivian. Because that matters too. Vivian didn't flinch. I understand that, she said. And I'm willing to prove it over time. Carter nodded slowly. That was the only answer that made sense. No promises. No guarantees. Just accountability. And time. The wedding wasn't canceled. But it wasn't rushed either. They postponed it. Not out of fear, but out of respect for what they had just uncovered. Because some decisions deserve space. And some foundations needed to be rebuilt before anything could stand on top of them.